US President Donald Trump, along with a delegation of politicians and the wealthiest American businessmen, arrived in China today with great pomp. This is the first visit by an American president to China in almost 10 years. The last time it was Trump as well, in November 2017. Notably, upon arriving in Beijing, Trump did not make any statements, but before leaving the US, he assured that he wanted to negotiate the opening of the Chinese market for American companies and a new trade agreement. He also added that he actually doesn't need Xi Jinping's help regarding the war with Iran, which has reached a deadlock, and it seems Trump doesn't know how to get out of it. But in Beijing, they are confident that Trump will still ask Xi Jinping for help with the war with Iran, and therefore Beijing has leverage of its own. So, let's continue. Let's discuss Trump's visit to Beijing in detail. My name is Alexi Pichi, let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, please subscribe to this YouTube channel, like this episode, and leave any comment under this video. This really helps a lot in promoting the content on YouTube, and I would be grateful to you for that. And also subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. So, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, arrived in China on Wednesday for a two-day visit. Heading to the summit in Beijing, the President of the United States said he intends to urge Chairman Xi Jinping of China to open the Chinese market to American business. The first visit of an American leader to China in a decade also includes executives from technology giants such as Nvidia, Tesla, Apple, Micron, and so on. Now, let me give you a direct quote. A quote from Trump from his social network, Truth Social. "I will ask Chairman Xi, an outstanding leader, to open up China so that these wonderful people can realize their potential. That's where I'll start." The wonderful people are the top businessmen from the United States of America. Now, let's move on to that. So, Trump's primary mission is trade, because he brought with him Elon Musk, Tim Cook, Jensen Huang, the heads of Boeing, Citigroup, JP Morgan, BlackRock, and in total, 17 top executives from the largest US companies. And that raised the question, is this even a state visit or just a visit for making business deals? Because, for example, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio flew to Beijing wearing a tracksuit, just like the one Nicolas Maduro, the former president of Venezuela, was arrested in and brought to America. Well, judging by the composition of the delegation, it's both a state visit and, of course, a visit for making business deals. Now, regarding trade, since some specifics have emerged, analysts are confident that both sides are trying to maintain the trade truce reached in October 2025, under which Trump suspended tariffs on Chinese goods, and Xi Jinping refused to take steps that could restrict global supplies of rare earth metals. The creation of 2 new forums to support mutual trade and investment is also expected. According to American officials, Washington is interested in increasing exports of Boeing aircraft, agricultural products, and energy resources to China in order to reduce the trade deficit. For Donald Trump, all of this would be a real gift before the congressional elections, overshadowing the topic of war with Iran. Beijing, in turn, is seeking to ease American restrictions on the export of chips and advanced semiconductors. Also, according to the Wall Street Journal, negotiations on artificial intelligence security may also be on the agenda. The US and China want to prevent the race in artificial intelligence from turning into a digital arms race. By the way, today, May 13, top trade delegations from the US and China have already held talks in South Korea. On the eve of the long-awaited summit between US President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping, which, let me remind you, will take place tomorrow, May 14. The delegations were headed by US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier Haley Feng. But here, as they say, trade is one thing and the war with Iran is not over, and this is a big obstacle for Donald Trump. President Trump hoped to focus on the US economic priorities with Xi Jinping, but the war with Iran and his failed attempts to make a peace deal with Tehran of course complicate the former goals of the American president. He wanted to discuss trade, but now must discuss war. And here's where it gets most interesting. Trump, leaving Washington, told journalists the following, and I quote, "I don't think we need any help with Iran. We will win one way or another peacefully or by some other means." So basically, he said he didn't need China's help and then immediately flew to ask China for help with Iran. And, that's not a contradiction, not at all. It's just political positioning. Well, you can't just fly to Beijing and say, please help us, we're stuck there. Of course, Trump presents himself as a winner, and on the other hand, in negotiations, the one who shows desperation always loses. That's why Trump publicly says we don't need any help. And some analysts believe that, unfortunately, Trump will negotiate from a weak position. The visit comes at a delicate moment for Trump's presidency, as his popularity in the US has declined due to the war with Iran and rising inflation as a result of that conflict. So, Trump is going to Beijing with a record low approval rating, with a war that has reached a stalemate, with oil prices above $100 per barrel, and he wants to appear as a winner in all of this. Well, that's a tough task. And here I want to share a few interesting quotes. For example, today's CNN correspondent spoke with Beijing residents ahead of the Trump-Xi summit. And here a programmer named Lee says the following to CNN correspondent's quote. "I think Trump is in a pretty tough situation right now with the war in Iran. I think he came here to get some leverage. That's what you might call people's diplomacy. Basically, Beijing is waiting while Washington wears itself out on several fronts at once. It's obvious that China can see America's decline under President Trump. And it's taking advantage of the moment when Trump visited Beijing during his first term in 2017. Xi Jinping welcomed him with a lavish display of Chinese history and culture. But this time, all the headlines were filled with the topic of China's potential future dominance, not its past greatness. That is, the focus is not on the past, but on the future. China now positions itself not as a civilization catching up with the West, but as a superpower ready to surpass it. And Xi Jinping will now appeal to this, understanding that Trump is stuck in a war with Iran. Now the Taiwan question, because of course we can't avoid it. Taipei is now concerned that the US president might make concessions regarding the island. Trump's plans to discuss arms sales to Taiwan with Xi Jinping have alarmed US allies in Asia, because no previous American president has ever done this before. To put it in perspective, it's as if Trump announced that he would discuss arms sales to Ukraine with Vladimir Putin. And here is Donald Trump himself, who said before his departure that the topic of Taiwan always comes up, and that he expects Xi Jinping to bring up this topic himself. At the same time, the Pentagon, right at the moment of Trump's departure, announced a military sale to Taiwan worth $12.5 million. It's not much, but still. This is either a very subtle game or complete chaos in coordination between the White House and the Pentagon, but I think it's the former. And finally, oil. The market is still very sensitive to any news coming from the Middle East. That means sharp fluctuations will continue. The price of Brent crude oil is reaching $108 per barrel. And the meeting between Trump and Xi Jinping could also affect these prices. And now for tomorrow's plans. So, on Thursday morning, local time, US President Donald Trump will begin 2 days of important talks with Chinese leader Xi Jinping in Beijing. At 8 a.m. on Thursday local time, which is 3 a.m. in Kyiv, Trump is scheduled to take part in the executive meeting. 2 hours later, that is, at 5 a.m. Kyiv time, Xi Jinping will meet with Trump at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. Shortly after that, there will be a meeting open to the press, which is the first briefing. Accordingly, in the early morning in Kyiv, we will already have some news. Shortly after that, there will be a meeting later that evening. The two leaders will take part in the state banquet. Well, basically, the main program of meetings will end during the day Kyiv time, so subscribe to this YouTube channel so you don't miss anything. I will be following all the events and of course covering them on this YouTube channel. I'll leave it at that for now. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so financially with any donation or a paid channel membership. You can use the links and payment details in the description of this video or the QR code on your screen. I will be grateful for any support you provide. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.